tomorrow morning. Billions of us will wake up to an alarm, drag ourselves to a job we hate, and trade 8 to 10 hours of our lives every single day just to put food on the table. We call it the daily grind. But for 99% of human history, work topped out at roughly 4 hours a day, and the concept of a boss didn't even exist. Think about it. For 300,000 years, our ancestors lived freely. They were taller, physically stronger, and in many ways healthier than almost anyone watching this today. But 12,000 years ago, we voluntarily threw that freedom away to break our backs in the dirt. The very first farmers were suddenly shorter, constantly sick, and died decades younger than the hunter-gatherers before them. So, if farming made life so much harder, why did it spread across almost the entire planet? For generations, we've been taught that agriculture was humanity's greatest invention, the exact moment we discovered progress. But the physical evidence buried beneath ancient villages, the bones, the tools, the seeds, even the soil itself, tells a far more complicated story. We didn't choose farming. We walked face first into a trap we couldn't escape. And it all started in one deceptively lush valley. Imagine walking into a forest where food grows faster than you can physically pick it. Around 13,000 BCE, in a strip of land near the Mediterranean known as the Levant, the planet did something unusual. The climate turned warm and wet, creating massive, wild fields of wheat and barley that sprouted entirely on their own. Dense oak forests spread across the hills, packed with gazelles, wild boar, and nuts. For the local hunter-gatherers, a group archaeologists called the Natufians, this was paradise. In a normal wilderness, if you stay in one spot for too long, you exhaust the food supply and you have to pack up camp. But in the Levant, the wild grain was so thick that a single family could harvest enough food in a few weeks to feed themselves for an entire year. Therefore, for the first time in 300,000 years, humans stopped moving. They built heavy stone houses, carved out massive granite mortars to grind grain, and settled into permanent villages. Notice what was happening here. These people weren't farmers yet. They hadn't planted a single seed. They were still hunter-gatherers. They just happened to live in a natural supermarket where everything was free. But this abundance forced a quiet, dangerous shift in human psychology. For hundreds of thousands of years, our brains were wired purely for the present moment. Eat what nature gives you today. Now, for the first time, humans were storing food for next month, guarding permanent stone homes, and depending entirely on one specific valley to stay alive. They thought they had found paradise. They had no idea they had just walked into a trap, because then, the weather completely collapsed. Around 10,800 BCE, the party abruptly ended. A sudden, massive climate shift known as the Younger Dryas struck the planet. In a matter of decades, global temperatures plummeted and rainfall dried up across the Middle East. The lush oak forests withered. The endless fields of wild grain shrank into isolated patches, and the wild animal herds either migrated away or died off completely. If this had happened 50,000 years earlier, humans would have simply packed up their temporary tents and followed the food elsewhere. But these villagers couldn't move anymore. Over generations of settled life, their population had exploded. They had children, elderly relatives, heavy stone tools, and permanent homes. They couldn't just walk out into the barren wilderness. There wasn't enough wild food left to keep everyone alive. Therefore, thousands of desperate people were forced to retreat, squeezing into shrinking oases around the few remaining water sources. Picture the tension inside these overcrowded camps. The wild food was running out. There were far too many mouths to feed. Moving meant instant starvation. Staying meant a slow death. They were completely backed into a corner. But sitting right outside their camps was a specific type of wild grass that grew quickly near water. To keep from dying, the villagers had to do something no humans had ever tried before. Instead of just gathering what nature provided, they started actively interfering with it. Standing by those shrinking water holes, these desperate villagers started doing the unthinkable, clearing plots of dirt, pulling out wild weeds, and pressing wild grass seeds into the soil. But nature had built wild wheat to resist human harvesting. Normal wild wheat stalks snap easily in the wind, scattering their seeds across the ground before anyone can gather them. Humans should have starved trying to collect enough of them. Therefore, humans were facing a massive hurdle. But every so often, a rare genetic mutation created a plant with a tough stalk that refused to drop its seeds. Hunter-gatherers picked these specific mutant grains because they were much easier to harvest. Without realizing it, by planting those specific mutant seeds year after year, humans unintentionally transformed a wild weed into a domestic crop. They created a plant that couldn't survive in the wild without human help, and in return, humans could no longer survive without it. This single shift changed human behavior forever. When you forage in a wild forest, you don't own the trees. But when you spend 6 months clearing, weeding, and watering a specific plot of land, that dirt becomes yours. Therefore, for the first time in 300,000 years, humans had fixed property to protect. Archaeologists excavating the earliest farming sites don't just find farm tools. They find a sudden, violent change in the historical record. They find massive defensive stone walls surrounding trenches and human skeletons bearing brutal trauma from stone axes. Fences, borders, theft, and organized warfare were born the exact moment we claimed ownership over a field. But the most dangerous trap wasn't the weapons. It was what was happening inside the home. Hunter-gatherer mothers had to carry their children while constantly migrating, meaning a woman could only realistically have one child every 4 or 5 years. But settled in permanent villages with an endless supply of boiled grain porridge, women no longer had to carry infants on long journeys. Soft grain porridge allowed babies to be weaned much earlier. Therefore, birth rates exploded, doubling and tripling village populations in a single generation. And that rapid population surge triggered an unstoppable chain reaction. More babies meant the village needed more food. More food meant clearing more fields. And clearing more fields meant even more babies. What started as a temporary emergency response to a drought turned into a permanent feedback loop. Within 2 generations, temporary shelters transformed into overcrowded towns. This sudden population boom created a massive new crisis. How do you keep thousands of people living on top of each other from collapsing into total chaos? The physical evidence of this crisis was unearthed in the 1950s by British archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon at the ancient site of Jericho. Digging deep down through layers of ancient soil, Kenyon's team found something astonishing: an 8-meter-tall stone tower built over 10,000 years ago. To organize thousands of workers to build a stone monument of that scale, you need a brand new social structure. Therefore, a surplus of stored grain created the world's first ruling class. Food reserves meant someone had to manage them, guard them, and tax them. For the first time in 300,000 years, humanity split into overseers and workers, leaders and laborers. But by the time these early farmers realized how demanding and grueling this new lifestyle had become, it was already too late. They couldn't just pack up and walk back into the forest. A town of 3,000 people could not survive on wild game. The surrounding forest would be hunted completely bare in a week. The trap had closed behind them. They weren't trying to build complex civilizations, conquer nations, or create endless daily labor. They were just trying to feed their children. But in doing so, they set off a domino effect that landed directly in our modern lives. Every system we live under today, from property lines and land deeds to tax brackets, alarm clocks, and 8-hour workdays, is the direct continuation of that first emergency decision to plant wild seeds in the dirt. We like to think we conquered nature and built modern civilization by choice. But the truth buried in the soil tells a different story. We didn't domesticate wheat. Wheat domesticated humans, and 12,000 years later, we're still waking up every morning to work the field. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. It really helps a new channel grow. My name is Jevlorik, and this is my very first video on YouTube. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment down below. And if there's a topic you'd like me to cover in a future documentary, let me know. I might just feature it in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.